Hi there, how you doing? We're going to be taking a look here at Chapter 8, some of the domestic and some of the foreign policies of the presidencies of this guy right here, him. It's Warren G. Harding right there, and we're going to be taking a look at some of the other presidencies, this time called Calvin Coolidge, and we're going to be taking a look at some of the other folks there as well. A guy named Andrew Mellon, who's important in the 1920s, as well as a guy named Herbert Hoover. And so we'll take a look here today at some of the domestic and foreign policies of the early 1920s underneath this fella Harding and Coolidge. I'm particularly looking at some of the economics of their domestic policies. And the essential question that we're looking at in this section is, and really this chapter, is how has the cultural identity of the United States changed over time? And so, of course, we've talked about things like laissez-faire economics, the Gilded Age. We've talked about progressivism, the age of imperialism, the emergence of World War I. And now we're going to see here as 1920s begin and World War I is becoming a very close, but still a memory, we're going to see laissez-faire return. And this laissez-faire that is going to be returning is going to be this idea of normalcy. And so what happens here as we approach 1920 is an election year. And in this election year, what we're going to see is Warren G. Harding begin to campaign on this idea of what he calls normalcy. And the concept of normalcy is pretty simple. It's this idea that progressivism hasn't done very well for us, right? I mean, it's going to essentially say that progressivism, while it certainly did make some changes to America, that certainly did, kind of benefit some people, that on the whole, it doesn't really benefit us all that much. And so what we're going to see here is Americans, progressives, running a Democrat called Cox. And Cox is not going to do very well. In fact, he has a running mate, a guy named Franklin Delano Roosevelt, who used to be Secretary of the Navy. But at any rate, what you're going to see here is this idea that the Democrats are going to continue to push underneath James Cox, which is going to be that, we're going to continue this progressive idea. We're going to continue to try and have an America that is, in fact, progressive. And Woodrow Wilson not wanting to run for another term, since he had already won two, he's going to come in there and he's going to say, you know what, I'm out. James Cox is going to say we're going to be progressive still, and Warren G. Harding is going to say we don't need progressivism anymore. We need to put an end to that, right? Post-World War I, unemployment is at an all-time high. Post-World War I, America is really, really, really struggling. And so what we're going to see here at the beginning of chapter 8 is that we need to put an end to that. We need to put an end to that kind of war fervor, an end to that anger that we see coming out of World War I. We need to put an end to the high unemployment, to the crazy wage fluctuations, the crazy inflation. We got to put a stop to it. We got to go back to the way things used to be. We got to get government out of America, out of the economy, let people live their lives. Because that's worked. It's worked in the past. That's his idea. That's his argument anyway. And when he's elected in 1920 and he puts laissez-faire policies into play, the economy is going to turn around. The economy is going to boom. Unemployment is definitely going to drop. Harding is by no means, though, a guy that you would consider progressive in pushing for those government reforms and a government that works. Remember, progressives said we have to fix those problems of laissez-faire by pushing back on government corruption, by pushing back on economic corruption. Harding says, well, we're going to go back to the way things used to be. He's going to go back to the way the government used to be run as well, and you're going to see a lot of corruption. Examples that we'll talk about in class include the Teapot Dome scandal, the fact that he had a love child conceived in the White House, potentially in the Oval Office closet. He's full of scandal. He's not even going to live a full term, Harding. He's actually going to die of a heart attack while he's in office. But regardless, what you should know is that Americans are going to look at the corruption that Harding brings into his administration And they're not going to care, because what he's done is he's put them back to work. He has given them a sense of stability. And perhaps his point is right, that America didn't need that progressive idea anymore because we've fixed what was broken. So let's just live and let live. And we'll see if Coolidge is going to continue with that as the presidential election of 1924 approaches, since Harding is dead and Coolidge, as vice president, takes over. Now, as Coolidge approaches that election in 1924, we have to understand that he's no fool. I mean, Coolidge is a smart guy. He realizes that return of laissez-faire has been really well received by Americans. I mean, look at the unemployment rate in the 1920s. Here it is, as we were approaching the actual presidential election in 1920, and wham, that unemployment rate is up, and people are upset, people are angry. Remember all that anger we talked about, the wage growth, the inflation, all that anger at the end of World War I, as we approach 1919 and 1920. But then, woof, the unemployment rate totally drops, and people say, dude, that's laissez-faire. Laissez-faire made that happen for us. We need to continue to support that. So you're going to see Coolidge say, you know what, I promise, if you elect me here, I mean, yeah, I know I came in because of the death of Warren G. Harding, but if you elect me, I'm going to continue these policies, and he's easily going to win. And he recognizes that Harding made a smart move with the appointment of this guy named Andrew Mellon as Secretary of the Treasury. In fact, Coolidge is going to continue him as Secretary of Treasury when he wins the presidency in 1924. He's actually going to keep him in there. He's going to say, you know what, I'm going to appoint you to keep running it. So Mellon, who actually runs the Secretary of the Treasury for the entire decade of the 1920s, he's like a magician with money. The man just has an understanding of how laissez-faire economics works. He's able to make millions and millions of dollars on his own, and he's going to put that acumen, that brilliance, mind, that making money, that talent making money to the country. And he's going to say, dude, we're going to use something called supply-side economics in the 1920s to continue to make this economy boom, to keep this unemployment rate low. And Coolidge is going to really benefit from this concept of supply-side economics. It's going to work really well for him throughout his term of 1924 up to about 1928. And even then, after he's reelected, you're going to see another politician named Herbert Hoover to say he's going to continue to use supply-side economics if you elect him as the 1920s close out and into 1929. So here's what that's going to look like. I just want to help you understand supply-side economics a little bit more so you know what Andrew Mellon was selling to the American people. Here's how it works. Okay, so we know that Americans all have jobs, or a lot of them have jobs, right? We all pay taxes. So if you see the first thing that's up there, the tippy top of that chart is going to be a cut on taxes for all. Now, this is really important because what this does is it says, you know what, if we cut taxes for all, everybody's going to have more money to spend. There's more money in our pockets. So let's pretend that we all have more money in our pockets right now, but we're all going to go out, we're going to spend that money because we have more money in our pockets. We know Americans don't like to save. So we're going to spend that money, and when we do spend that money, that means the companies that we spend it on are going to make more profit. That's great, because when those companies make more profit, they can afford to hire more workers, and that unemployment rate, which we had seen people worried about, well, that unemployment rate can continue to drop, or at least stay really low. And since companies are doing so well, in addition to just hiring workers, we can raise their wages, which is great, because as we raise people's wages and their income grows, they're going to pay more in taxes as they earn more, because we know that we have that graduated income tax, right? So that the more you make, the more you pay in taxes. But since we had cut taxes, even though we're paying more at that lower rate, which means even as we make more, we still have more to spend because we had that cut in rates as we went along. Companies are going to make more profit. People can get paid more. We can hire more workers. We're going to pay more as we make more money in that graduated income tax. But since we're still paying more at that lower rate, because the first thing we did was cut taxes for all, we're still going to have more money to spend. And this cycle works really, really well. Laissez-faire economics / in this case, supply-side economics works really, really, really well as long as companies continue to hire workers and pay us more wages. If they do that, boom, man, the economy is going to go around and around and around and around, and everyone's going to continue to make more money, and everyone's going to be happy. That's the idea, and that's the idea that Andrew Mellon puts into play. And it works really, really well for Harding and Coolidge. And then as 1929 approaches, for Herbert Hoover, who's going to take over. In fact, 1929 sees, in the first part of 1929, sees some of the best benchmarks in our economy that we'd ever seen. So with that being said about the economic side of this, the return of laissez-faire economics, and setting up the fact that Herbert Hoover is going to embrace this concept as we approach the 1930s, we want to take a look at the foreign policy side of Harding and Coolidge's presidencies, so we get a feel for what they did with other nations as well as just here at home with the economy. Now, the important thing to remember here is that coming out of World War I, as we start to talk about this foreign policy of Coolidge and of Harding, is that America really had a huge distrust of anarchists, people that would destroy our government, and a huge distrust of Bolsheviks, or people that wanted to make a communist dictatorship in America. So we've got this real distrust going on. We've got this real fear going on. Remember, we had the Palmer raids that deported hundreds of Russian immigrants. We had bombings happening all over the country. So how does America kind of look at this and deal with this as we approach the 1920s, as we have this fear in the last years of Woodrow Wilson? And the answer, at least when it comes to foreign policy, is going to be isolationism. America's going to say, look, we're the dominant leading power in the world. We've got the strongest army, we've got the strongest navy, we've got the strongest economy, and frankly, Europe, you screwed the world over when you got into World War I. So you know what? We're done with you. Remember, we're going to reject the Treaty of Versailles. We're not going to get involved in the League of Nations because it's not going to be a world we want to be involved in. But at the same time, we're going to put pressure on the world to keep World War II from happening and to make sure those countries pay off their bills to us. Remember, President Wilson had that plan, those 14 points, to keep war from ever happening again. And in the Treaty of Versailles, Europe said, nope, don't want it. Instead, I'm interested in punishing Germany. I want to make sure Germany pays its debts. And I'm interested in making sure that they somehow never recover to fight World War II, without ever really addressing any of those underlying issues like arms races. So Coolidge and Harding are going to attempt in the 1920s to kind of tackle these problems. So with that understanding that we are the dominant economic power in the world, we want to protect our wealth. We want to protect our country from those enemies that are out there. So what are we going to do to protect our country and our wealth? Well, we're going to turn to this idea of isolationism by avoiding involvement in world affairs. And most Americans by the 1920s want to do that. And we begin to more and more support something that we call isolationism. And you can see here a cartoon that really depicts it well, where Americans are building a wall. We are literally walling ourselves off from the rest of the world because we're putting America first. We're going to keep U.S. out of war. We're going to keep the U.S. out of foreign entanglements. And we're going to protect our country and protect our wealth. An example of protecting our wealth, by the way, comes down to this issue of war debts. Now, we know that the Germans had to pay $55 billion in reparations to the European powers who had fought in World War I, but they also have war debts that they have to pay off to us as well as to other people. So America's got to come up with a way to do this because there's no way a country like Germany can pay off all those war debts. It's just not possible. So we come up with this clever plan, and it's up here. It's called the Dawes Plan. Here's how it works. We say, all right, Germany, I know you can never pay back all those loans to the Allies. You need help. I'm going to lend you money. I'm going to lend you $2.5 billion. And we're going to continue to do this, by the way, every year, year in and year out, over the process of decades. I'm going to lend you $2.5 billion in loans. And you can keep $500 million for yourself. Take that $500 million, put it in your pocket, use it to invest, use it to make more money. That's your money. The $2 billion that I gave you, though, do me a favor. Hand that over to the allies, would you? Pay it off to them. Pay off some of those reparations. And Germany's like, oh, phew, okay, good. We got some breathing room. We have $500 million in our pocket. We can pay off $2 billion in reparations to the Allies. And then we say to the Allies, all right, Allies, you take that $2 billion that Germany gave you and you invest it. You invest it in your own economy, you invest it in infrastructure, you invest it in whatever enterprises you've got going on, make some money with it. And when you do, pay back to us $2.6 billion that you owe us in war debt, in war loans. That's brilliant. Because look at this. America gives out $2.5 billion in loans, gets back $2.6 billion in loans. We just made $100 million. And we do that routinely, regularly. We make these loans, we give stipulations, we say what the loans can be used for. The countries begin to get back on their feet, and they're still giving us profit. We protect our wealth, and hopefully we keep these countries from going back to war with each other. Protect our country from future wars. Some other things we do to protect our country, protect our wealth. We're going to call countries together. We're going to say, listen, everybody, let's gather here in Washington, 1921. It's called the Washington Conference, and we're going to discuss disarmament. And we're going to say, you know what, we need to talk about ways to keep our countries from fighting. And we actually agree over a period of years to shrink the size of our navies, or at least stop them from growing any further, in an attempt to stop those arms races. And it's really a good idea of kind of disarmament and disarming our own countries, shrinking our navies. It's a reasonable idea, and it works for a few years, but by the 1930s, it's all gone. But it does at least slow the process of a return to arms races. And we actually also outlaw war. Another idea that seems reasonable, where 14 different countries get together, a lot of them all ones that participated in World War I, and we sign the Kellogg-Briand Pact, and it outlaws war, and we say there's no war anymore. But the problem with that one is that we don't actually force countries to disarm. The Washington Conference at least talks about it, and we do shrink the sizes of our navies. Kellogg-Briand says we're not going to have war anymore, but you can keep your weapons. Now, how does that work? That's like saying, well, I won't fight you, and you won't fight me, but I can still keep my gun, and you can still keep your gun, but just don't shoot it, okay? I promise, I won't shoot if you won't shoot. We know that's not going to work. It's a noble idea, but the world just isn't ready for it. It's still not ready for it in a lot of different ways. So even though we try to outlaw war, even though we do slow the growth of navies, at its heart, this isolationism is to protect America, to protect our country, protect our wealth, and we're going to continue to see that trend of kind of protecting America in future lessons as we go forward.